Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion. Second hour, we're going to talk about Office Hours 2.0, where we are, where we're going, what's working, what's not working. So if you've got questions or comments about Office Hours 2.0, go ahead and throw those into Mukana. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. Our first question in from Mark Simon in Berlin. How would you do to have multiple live captions, 8 languages, on a live stream without having separate video streams per language? Ideally, there's only one video stream and the user selects the caption language without having the video stopping. Thanks.
Yeah, so this can be done. It just isn't done in the social networks. So if you're trying to do this with something like Facebook or YouTube or even Vimeo, you're going to need to have multiple video streams that you're jumping from one to the next. If you are using something like just a straight HLS, so if you're building up your own CDN delivery system to make this actually work, you have a lot more options, because basically what happens is that in HLS, you're sending all of these as separate files. So these are segments. So you have a segment that is the video, and then you have a segment that is the audio, and you have a segment that is the captions. And you can have as many of these caption segments as you like. And then it's just a matter of your player understanding that it can go grab those captions, the different ones. So you can have as many as you want. You give them the languages. Now, where you see this most often is something like the Apple Foundation player will do it. So if you're only doing something to Apple, you would just use their Foundation player and it will just see those. But you could also use a variety of other off-the-shelf. I think the JW player will do it as well. Across a wider range of platforms. So as far as doing that, you just need to basically create a VTT segmented output to make that work. And the way that we typically do this is that we would send that data into something like an elemental, which will see it on the bank data. Now, here are the tricky parts. So the part about streaming it is not hard, but it's not easy either. So the issue that you really get into is how do you deliver 608, 708, preferably 708 for some of the other languages. How do you deliver those to be converted to BTT and to stay in sync? So the problem is that generally the way we send those caption data in is via the bank data, the line 21 that sits inside of the SDI signal. So a lot of times you end up having to send a whole bunch of video signals to the elemental or to a hardware encoder, and then have them all writing to that. Now, you do have a little variance in that. You don't have to have them frame accurate because the translation is going to be 3 to 4 seconds behind anyway. And so that is how you typically handle that. There's other ways to make that work, but that's generally the way it works currently. The next problem you have is how do you encode all of those? And so typically to encode those into the line 21, you need something like an EEG 492, which is going to take that SDI in. And technically you can do 2 languages, but it's pretty challenging. So it's like a language per encoder that you're going to put out there to get that captioning in. The next challenge that you have is that there just aren't very many people to do it. So you can't, the stenographers can really only do English, Spanish, and sometimes French and German. Generally, other languages become very difficult because there's just not that many people doing it. In the United States, you can find a lot of English and Spanish because it's a law. By law, you have to be able to deliver captions. But in other countries, you don't. And in some countries like India, China, and others, that alphabet cannot be done in real time. And so what you end up having to do is send English into a translation system like Google Translate. There's some captioning systems that will do this. So you pipe the English in through something like StreamText or a more native version, and it pumps out all of the translations for you from the English. Unfortunately, it's not as accurate because it's a computer doing stuff that sometimes has typos and everything else because a stenographer is going as fast as they can. So you end up with a lot of wow and flutter in a computer generated one. Now, there are other ways to do that using what we call respeaking, where someone listens to you and then speaks it out and AI turns it back into text. That's being done by AI Media. And AI Media might have better solutions for this right now that I don't know about. I haven't had to do that many languages for a long time because generally when we go past English and Spanish, we go to audio. Audio is a lot simpler. So with audio, when you want to have multiple languages there, what you do is we still end up going back into those, but we can pack all the audio channels onto an SDI signal, send them up to the cloud, 16 channels, let's say, or 8 channels, and with all the extra audio that we need, and split it off. And again, you can change those languages. Again, in a custom HLS player that knows what it's doing, you can change the languages while it's playing. That becomes a little bit more difficult with keeping the sync, but audio is really the way to go if you're doing more than about 2 languages and captioning live. Of course, you can definitely do it in post. Next question.
It's from Fred Eric Eckert in Bad Herdenhead, Germany. What technology is used in this project? Looks like some kind of 3D and a low latency video call. Office Hours 5.0?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I looked at it. I'm not sure the video, there was an interesting video, relates to the questions so much. They're talking about quantum physics, quantum computing. Interesting theory. I mean, they're talking about the fact that like this microphone in quantum physics could just as easily be a banana, but it tends to be a microphone, and that's the way.
Well, I think they go a little. If you go a little further into it, they're setting a two-way conversation. Where they're able to. If you watch through that system, I don't know how they started talking about it there, but basically they're talking about having a mirror or what looks like a mirror or a portal into being able to talk to someone else.
Entanglement. They were talking quantum entanglement, where they can entangle particles.
I don't know.
Things. I
don't remember any part of that video talking about entanglement. I think you
remember the D-Wave computers at NASA?
I think you're in the wrong video. Go ahead, John.
I just clicked the link and I went somewhere.
There's no entanglement there. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I didn't hear any of that either. I heard mostly marketing talk here in this video, and this reminds me of the high-end Cisco rooms. Cisco had a room, and the gimmick here is that you're on an even plane, and they have excellent camera and exit lighting, and then a big giant monitor, and then it looks like you're sitting at the same desk. It super reminded me of that. I think any 4K transmission would look as good if it was lit well. So I didn't see anything exciting in this video.
You good, Courtney?
Yeah, I think they're using the Pepper's Ghost kind of a situation. They do this in several museum displays where they call it a hologram, but it's really just a mirror at 45 degrees, and then they have a large monitor that's mounted up in the ceiling or down on the floor with the 45-degree mirror, and so that you're seeing through the glass, you're seeing an image of the person on the other side that is being cut out and put in front of a black background. And then you see like a sofa or some set on the other side that's lit so that you see the person looks like they're sitting in the sofa or on the sofa, but they're really just an aerial image that's reflected off the monitor. So as you move your head, the image shift makes it look kind of 3D, but it's not a 3D image. It's just 2D on a piece of glass.
I looked at the video. I think it actually is some 3D.
Then how do they do it without viewing without glasses?
Well, because the main thing is if you look at how they're generating it, if you look through that piece there, there is a 3D object being generated there, and we're seeing more and more of this kind of experimentation. A lot of this started with the Xbox and I can't think of the name of the little there was a little infrared set that would go with it, and just escaping the Kinect. So a lot of people started testing the Kinect. So it wasn't tracking. It was really, the Kinect was building a real-time 3D model of what it was seeing out there with infrared. And what a lot of people have done is they started hacking those Kinects. The Matterport that we now can do with our phone first started with using kind of Kinects. And there's a lot of folks that kind of use that technology there. What they're doing right now, what I believe they're doing, looking at that, is if you look at a couple clips right at the very beginning, you'll see an open desk, and you'll see a bunch of apparatuses below that. And I think that what they're actually doing there, and there's probably some above it as well, they have a handful of those being all projected, and they're very quickly compiling those. Because one of the problems you have when you have a Kinect only in one place is that when you have a Kinect only in one place, you have occlusion issues, because if I put my hand up here, you can't see on the other side. But if you have a couple different angles, you can grab all of them. We saw this with, there was a Zelensky hologram that you could download that was generated by what looked like a bunch of connects that were there. And I don't think it was done live, but it was calculated. So it's calculating 3D space, and there are a couple different technologies for screens where you can kind of move your head back and forth, and they're using prisms to have you be able to, like with my with this, I can, with my little hydrogen Android phone, I can see 3D. If I pull back and forth because of the
lenticular screen.
Yeah, lenticular screen on it. So you get a little bit of dimension to it, which will. But if you look closely at the videos of them talking, the reason that I think that they're probably doing 3D there is because you can see the geometry on the hair. So they did to their credit, they did use high resolution hair, but that's not a key. That's actual polygons that are going along the hair, and that shows you the resolution of the 3D object that's being generated there. So especially with the African American woman who's got big frizzy hair, you'll see it rolling up and down. Now, not the side shots, but the straight shots. With any of them, you'll see kind of a harder edge, and there's the 3D model that's being generated by from there, and you can see that it's a lower resolution model, and then it's mapping the color data back onto it. And it's most likely, in that case, doing some version of a projection map to make that work. And one of the advantages of that is also why they're talking about compression, is sending that 3D model is actually, it can be done in a lower bandwidth than sending the video. So,
but why do all that if you have a high resolution, since it's a live thing, high resolution video image of the person on the other side? Why do it? Because
eventually what they want to be able to do is have you feel like you have geometry. This is obviously very early. Google's known for doing things that might take them another couple of years or decades to get working, but they still throw money at it now. And what you're looking at, with one person, it's kind of interesting and doesn't quite make sense. With two or three people, where you would see them in different positions, it starts to make, it starts to have you feel like you're at a meeting, or feel like you're at a dinner table, or feel like you're, those are the things that'll happen in the future. But right now they're just showing, the team has to get some PR or they won't get more funding. So I think that they're putting something out, but I think that it's a first little step forward, not the final thing. And they try to keep it in a pretty safe space. So some of us go, yeah, well, I'd rather just use video, which I would rather, right now I would use video, and for a whole bunch of reasons. Not only would I use
8K video instead of,
8K video, but the issue is the 3D model will look better at the same. So the problem with 8K video as you start, because really what you want is 120 frame per second, 8K will look like someone standing in front of you. Like, it'll just look like there's somebody there, but it will do that at 300 to 500 megs a second. That's what it's going to want to suck up to get that kind of bandwidth. To get that resolution. And these models will take 10, 10 or 15 megs a second.
But the computational, the computational penalty for calculating all that 3D data in real time and mapping it onto it is going to take much more computational energy than just to shoot an 8K image and send it. So again, this is probably 15 years from being at someone's house. This is not maybe 10. This is really, you can see that YouTube, for their own compression, for video compression, are building their own chips. So what you're talking about is most likely a dedicated chipset that would be designed to execute this one thing in the process. And so it's a eventually, or a dedicated set of processors to make that work. So it's probably not. And again, it's probably an enormous amount of hardware right now, and probably will be for at least the next 5 to 10 years. It's not. This isn't something that people are going to have in their houses anytime soon. But it's trying to get people thinking about, again, not having to be in the same place. Now, I think, again, I would rather video, because I want to be able to cut the things. I want to be able to show you things. I want to be able to pop things up, and all of that stuff would be defeated by this system. And so I think that there's a long way for it to go, but it's an interesting technology. Bill, real quick.
Real quick, I was surprised that you had that difference in understanding the videos. And so I clicked on it once, and it took me to a YouTube explainer video about quantum entanglements. I clicked on it again, and it took me to the Sundar Pichai Alphabet CEO video. This is weird. I've never had a link take me to two different places in two different instances.
So that explains the quantum entanglement. Yeah, what I saw when I went to it was, And I didn't click on it. I cut and pasted it in. But when I did that, I got people talking through a mirror. Go ahead, Tlaloc.
I think it was pointed to the very last seconds of the video,
right.
and then it jumped over to something else. So apparently you've been watching a lot of science, Mitchell.
It's a YouTube playlist. Yeah, because the second one up on the playlist, mine is demonstrating quantum supremacy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's just weird.
You saw the last couple of seconds. I think that was what happened there. Next question.
Thanks for clarifying that. Next question from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Can we have an IBC countdown timer in after hours?
Dennis?
So I understand that Jonas has built one, so you just need to get the link from him, and then yes, you can.
Put it up. Absolutely. Next question.
Paul is back with another. What can you do about the clunky way, too much strain, the USB-C cable connects to the Insta360 Link?
Good, Courtney.
Well, you need to try and find you a very skinny, flexible cable. They sell them on Amazon. They don't last very long because they're skinny and flexible, but it'll take a lot of strain off that connector. That's the only thing I can think of, unless you want to 3D print something that will hold it and keep it from being pulled out or being, strain relief it in some way.
You go ahead, Bill.
We talked about Tether Tools, which is a company that makes little strain relief products for DSLRs and for other kind of camera rigs, and so that stuff can be really useful. Also, I did a quick search on micro clamp, the term, and I got a surprising number of little tiny precision clamps, and you could probably just rig something. This is kind of in the realm of micro grip gear, so you could put the camera in some kind of a mount. It's got a 1/4-20 in the bottom, and then maybe a micro cage around it, and clamp your cables to that using some of these micro clamp tools. You'd have a pretty strain relief and not terribly impeding system to let the camera do what a camera's doing without having the strain on the cables.
I also think that there are some USB-C right angles that you could theoretically put in there that would allow you to have it just go down, and then you would still want to build something, whether it's 3D printed, to not have that pull down. So you want to probably build that out. I have to admit that I'm kind of in the process with mine of I still have the case. And so I'm trying to figure out how to build a little box for this. And so what I'm actually going to do, I started trying to digitize this, which I found that digitizing a negative cavity was more painful than I thought it would be. And so instead, my next step here is that I am going to fill this with plaster of Paris probably over the weekend, and then pull out the mold of this. And then I'm going to paint it and spatter it so that it has lots of little details to it. And then I'm going to use reality capture on my phone to get a very high resolution model of this. And then I'm going to figure out how to print.
Hey, Alex, is the back of that open? Yeah, is the back of that open? You could cut it away, and maybe that's the negative space.
It's just too big.
Okay.
Oh, the back of this. I could cut this away? Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that'll give you the opposite.
Yeah, it could. It's got a bunch of gunk on it. But you're right that I could pull it. That'd probably be simpler.
Couldn't you scan the
big
camera
thing
itself?
is I don't really want to destroy this because I need it for other things, and so I'm kind of cutting it away. Is not I'm not as excited about that.
You could just cut the four corners carefully,
pull it
and open it wide, and then put it back together and put some gaff tape.
The plaster of Paris was so much more fun.
I know.
So it was like I think I'm going to fill it with plaster of Paris just because I want to. So I think I've already gone down that path. I already have the plaster of Paris. I have little.
Why don't you just put that little insert in a case and be done?
No, because it's too big. It's too big. The case has to be. They made it for whatever they did here. I need it to be as small as it can be to fit into my bag. Like it's just that I did think of that earlier, but when I tried to fit it into things, I was like, oh, this is bigger than it needs to be, and I'm trying to get it down into a little travel pack. I may actually. I don't have the bag here. Do I have the bag here? No. I may. I have this little bag, and I may build everything formed, for the US mix pre and the camera and all the little bits and pieces, so that I have this little bag that does almost everything except for the lighting. I'm trying to. It looks like I have to go to LA a lot more often than I was in the past. It's like every 2 weeks, it's like, hey, can you come down? I'm like, okay.
That bag will be good for a week until the next gadget comes along.
Yeah, I don't change my travel kits that often.
Oh, okay.
They don't evolve as fast. Because mostly I don't like to travel. Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, USA, noticed on LinkedIn that Tlaloc has a new position. Congratulations. Can you give us the scoop?
Tlaloc, what's going on?
Yeah, so I'm doing some contracting work for Zoom, helping with some, I guess, tech support for the Zoom OSC and the Zoom ISO products, and it's as if like I'm the mid level. I'm not the high level, and I'm not the low level. So if somebody asks a question and the first tier can't answer it, then it comes to me, and I try to help out.
That's awesome.
It's a short.
Congrats.
It's just you notice I'm kind of busy. I do a lot of things, so it's a short part time, like a few hours a week. But it's
do you get to
fun.
choose the music that we have to listen to waiting for you?
No, I'm still learning about the whole system.
That's awesome. So congratulations. It seems like a lot of
thanks. Appreciate
a lot of friends over there now. So it's very cool. Excellent. Next question.
Al Trivet in Carmichael, California. Any comment on the SpaceX and T-Mobile technology alliance?
So basically what this is setting up is that I'll let John explain it. Go ahead, John.
No, you were on the right track, Alex. I just read it in the news that they were going to support, I think it's 2024, that they were going to support the Skylink by 2024 on their phone devices. I don't know how they do that with the small antenna. We'll see.
I think that they're actually looking at using the Starlink 2. So the next one, which is, I guess, 7 meters long, the new Starlink 2 satellites will be able to interact with, is it PCS? That's their bandwidth or whatever. And so it's not very much bandwidth. It's 2 to 4 megs a second per region for the satellite coverage. So you can text message, maybe do a phone call. But that's really what it's designed for. It's just designed that there's never a place where you have no coverage. I do think it's interesting where we really see innovation is where people are just a little outside of the center. So Verizon and AT&T, of course, have the center of cell coverage. And so T-Mobile is always a little bit more scrappy trying to find another solution. And Starlink, this is a good deal for Starlink as well. So I think it's going to be interesting. We are going to get to a point where you can't tell people that you were out camping and just didn't have any connectivity, which I think is a real bummer. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I saw a story on that this morning on TV that said at first it would be SMS messaging only. Later, maybe voice, but right now they're looking at it as mainly for emergency contact if you're hiking somewhere. And you'll have to have a phone that can receive those satellite channels. So you have to have a different antenna on it.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Don't forget AT&T owns DirecTV, and they have a bunch of geosynchronous satellites up there. So who knows what they might invent from that.
I think that would be harder. Using DirecTV is because it's a much more traditional distribution pipeline. I think you'd have to build those are really large and expensive satellites, and they've been up there for a while, and it would probably be very difficult they're much further away from the Earth than the Starlinks, and so I think that would be probably difficult. Next question.
Next question coming in from Rodrigo Munez from Stockholm, Sweden. Excuse me. When streaming to some platforms, often 1080p is the standard, is there any point in gains to getting in using cams with higher resolution? Can you recommend capture card scaler switches to keep finer details when using 4K plus capable streaming cams for 1080 streams?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because for what we built out, because we were building a system a couple of years ago from scratch, I made the conscious choice to build it 4K rather than building it for 1080, even though I knew that would be unlikely for any audience member that we would ever have watching our streams to ever be wanting to watch a 4K stream. So we did that for one reason, for several reasons, but one of those is future-proofing. At the same time, we want to be able to capture as much detail as we can for editing afterwards, so that if you record in 4K, it gives us many more options to crop in and edit in, so it's much easier. Our cameras, at the same time, because they're designed for 4K, if you set them to 1080, often you get windowing or you get a fuzzier signal. So some of the PTZs that we have, when they are set to 1080, it's a softer signal than when they are set to 4K on the same frame, because the camera itself is doing some, apart from the fact that the quality is going down, the camera itself is actually doing a little descaling rather than sending you a true 1080 signal. So there can be a number of different reasons for going with a higher quality, but usually it's within those three. It's future proofing, making it sure that the quality is there for editing, and also getting the most out of your cameras. I find that's it often comes down also to what does your client want, because I know a lot of colleagues who prefer to stream in 720 when they're on remote location, just because they know they'll get the stream out rather than necessarily be pushing for the highest quality stream. But when we were building our system, it was about trying to push the boat out as far as we could and future proof as much as possible.
Yeah, especially when you're getting started, it's nice to get used to the bigger version rather than the smaller version. It's hard to go up. I put a post in the event, or in the chat, of one of our early tests. So we started buying 4K in 2016. Or Pixel Core did. And so one of our first concerts was done with Natalie Dawn from Pamplemousse at the Patreon offices. Anyway, so but that's a very early on stream that you can see that's in 4K. And it did back then, especially 5 years ago, definitely required an enormous amount of hardware to make that actually work, because a long time ago. It's much easier to do 4K now, but it's still, again, the pipeline, I find that the most cost-effective pipeline for 4K is still Blackmagic. If you're going to do 4K URSAs and switchers and so on and so forth. Now, Blackmagic has kind of backed off on a little bit of that because a lot of people aren't doing 4K. And so they have more 1080p solutions than they had in the past. But the fact that we had moved with them to 4K allows us to do a lot of other things there. And again, there's a handful of clients that, they want to show off. They want to have the highest quality possible. It's nice to be able to just seamlessly go, sure, we can do that, as opposed to, I'd have to rebuild my entire pipeline to make that work. So the future proofing that Richard talked about is important, and you get used to working with it, and you start with doing lots of tests. And that's why we're starting to do tests with HDR, with 5.1, with all those things. It's because you don't want to figure it out on your first paying job. You want to do it all the time, build up those skill sets, and even sell those skill sets that, hey, if you want to do something new and different, we have clients all the time. What do I do that's new and different? What do I do that's better than everybody else? How do I turn it up? And if you can find a way to do that relatively cost effectively, oftentimes they'll jump in and pay you an extra 10, 20, 30% on a job. And if you already bought all that hardware and figured it all out, that's just extra revenue coming in to make that work. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, Alex is spot on. The learning is one of the most exciting things for me, and learning the whole pipeline from camera to customer delivery, and making sure that our pipeline was robust 4K wise. Our editing practices were in 4K. Our graphics skills were in 4K. All of that was really important to us when we were building things out. As Alex says, then it's easier to say to the client, would you like to bump this up to a higher resolution? It will take a lot of work, but we can do it.
Yeah, well, and also, same thing with HDR, same thing with 5.1. I because I had already done some of that, I got a lot of work, over the last couple of years doing HDR and surround, because we had a client that was looking for that solution, and I had already been doing it for a couple of years. Had I done any commercial project with it? Nope. But did I understand how it worked? Yes. And so I think that is, that's you want to start getting your head around things whenever you possibly can. Next question.
Greg Kadoki from Toronto, Canada. Catching up on today's office hours, I watched the YouTube feed on my TV. When I went to change the playback speed, it was grayed out. Even though I'm not set up for 5.1 on that TV, it was selected in YouTube. Turning it to stereo allowed playback speed to be changed.
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's probably because it can't, to change the playback speed on YouTube, it pitch corrects back down to normal. So people don't sound like they're Mickey Mouse when you speed it up. And that pitch correction of the PCM data probably breaks the 5.1 matrix, so they can't play back 5.1 when they're pitch correcting to a faster speed. So if you drop it back down to just stereo PCM, then it can still do it, because that pitch corrector is designed to work on a 2-stream signal.
And in general, everybody's still working on it. We have to remember that we're one of only a handful of channels, I think probably less than 10 in the world, that has 5.1 for YouTube. So I think that, this is early on testing. So we're just trying to figure some of those bits and pieces out. So it does automatically go to 5.1 if you have a device that knows about it for over the television. So OTT. It's not working. I don't think it's active on anything else right now, but we're, again, early days, figuring stuff out, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. You'll see us do a lot more experimentation. I finally just brought a computer in that'll process the 5.1. So I handed it to JJ yesterday. So we're going to be, hopefully in the next week or two, you'll start to see us start to play a little bit more with that. Next question.
Alexander Knight from Vancouver, BC, Canada. In the summertime, recording audio with the windows closed in my home studio becomes unbearable. I can't have the AC on because it's too loud. Looking for cooling solutions. Feels like it's 100 degrees in here.
Go ahead, Bill.
As someone who's done a lot of voiceover work over the course of my career, and I'm often in voice booths, and it gets ugly in there. So a couple of things I'll suggest. If you're not in any kind of enclosed space like that and just in a room, I don't know if you have a ceiling fan or have the ability to install a ceiling fan, but literally, even if you get a high quality ceiling fan, they are virtually silent. I have one on right now blowing air down on me, even with an open microphone, and it's quiet enough that it's not a problem. In other circumstances, if you want something specific, in my voice booth and in other circumstances, I've used fans that are ducted that are used for in an industry formerly illegal but now often legal across America. They are for hydroponics and for growing things. They are inline ducted fans, and by ducted I mean you can get a flexible 4-inch tube and get air from a cooler area and bring it in, and these fans are virtually silent. Cloudline and others on Amazon, you can search for that. You will find some of these. You're just looking to move air, get it on you in a way that doesn't affect sound pickup, and there are a lot of good solutions for doing that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Alexander, when I was your age, we worked in 100-plus degree studios, and we loved it. But if you don't want to suffer through all of that, a little swamp. Go ahead, Alex.
No, go ahead.
It's an interesting observation. We would sweat. We'd take our shirt off. We'd rip through that copy. Anyhow, a swamp cooler would work well in addition to the ceiling fan that Bill mentioned. I think Bill was referring to a swamp cooler, but it's basically all it senses cool water with a fan, slow-moving fan moving over it. So that'll help you, and the rest of it, you're just going to have to put up with it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Water-cooled underwear. They do make certain undergarments designed. They wear them at Disney, and all those characters out there wandering around in Florida under that 110-degree heat have water-cooled suits that they're wearing underneath that have a little heat exchanger and pumps cool water throughout little tubes in the suit. So you could do that and stay comfy, cool, sitting there in your 100-degree room.
That's fun.
And quiet.
Go to Alex.
Yeah, I like the ceiling fan suggestion. I actually did not think about that. I thought about putting the air conditioner in the bedroom, which is directly behind the wall behind me here, and then maybe cutting a hole and piping AC through that. But I don't think the Strata is going to like that all that much. So
is it a portable air conditioning unit?
Yeah, it's one of those portable ones. It's just I have it hooked up to a window, and it's the dual hose design.
Right. Yeah. So exactly as also as Bill has said, what we've done a lot in those areas is to extend the ducking, so get the air conditioner out of the room and then go to where whatever it's exhausting, whatever that looks like, we form something around it and give it a long duct. And a lot of times we help that by giving it another fan. And the thing to think about is that the larger the duct, the quieter it will be and the more air will go through it. So if you push it down to small, you'll oftentimes hear the fan as we make it really big. So a lot of times we're using like 8-inch ducts, that are going through it. I have found that the easiest thing to do if you're not allowed to do anything to the walls is to buy another door and cut a hole in it, because the door is easy you just take the pins off and you can buy a cheap door, put it down, cut a hole in it, and push things through it if you want to do that. Because you can, the door will cost you $50 or something like that to put in there. And then you put if you're a renter or you have a wife that won't let you cut holes in the wall, or a partner that doesn't let you cut holes in the wall, the doors are easy to then replace later, or put back the old one, put that in the garage and then put it back when you don't need it. But I would think about getting something ice cold. The other thing to think about is how much you can withstand cold. So a lot of times what we do is turn it off when we're on air, but keep it at like 64 degrees, so just really turn it down to where it's really chilly, and then just turn it off when we go live. And we've had ones, it's not really good for the air conditioner, but for cheaper ones, we don't care. And we have ones that will turn off its power. They have little activators. They have a remote activator that'll turn it on and off. And then we take that over, and when we hit on air, it turns it off. When we hit off air, it turns it back on again. It's really bad for the air conditioner, but if you're only doing it it's only a $300 air conditioner, it'll last a season. So anyway, next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin. Being part of the IBC Field Crew, I'm going to take care of the lead camera, tech, cinematographer, director of photography role. As I'm kind of unexperienced with this, what things and reminders should be on my list to do in advance and on site?
Tlaloc?
I mean, I think of all the really small and boring things. Have extra batteries, have extra cables, have ways to clean lenses. All those things that seem like they are small are really big when you're trying to do something like that and have it move fluidly over the course of a show. So think through all of those kinds of ideas and make sure that all your cameras have protection with cages.
Good guy.
Yeah, I'd say practice. Get to know that camera really well and change exposure very quickly. So if somebody steps into the light or you get blown out or it gets too dark all of a sudden, that you're able to compensate rather quickly. I keep my framing a little looser because people in these situations sometimes move around unexpectedly. And so you don't want to be so tight that it's jarring. And I probably wouldn't, unless you're doing a 2-camera shoot, I probably wouldn't follow them as they try to show you something small. Like I wouldn't try to push in for, a quick zoom in unless I think it's Richard, you got the 18-80 Canon on that rig? Yeah, it's going to be a servo zoom. So it's up to you if you want to practice doing these. You could flip it over to manual zoom and practice these kind of whip zooms where you can punch in really fast. But again, it's going to come down to practice. But unless you're doing a 2-camera shoot, I'd say stay loose. And then watch out for people coming in. If you got blockers, it's nice to get somebody to kind of shield you from somebody waltzing across your scene, because that'll happen at trade shows.
Good, Bill.
And you mentioned a lot of operator stuff. Since you happen to specify both cinematographer and director of photography, those are more supervisory and conceptual roles. And if you want to think about that, if you want to just keep your mind on operator, do that. But they would be the people thinking about how to approach the job in terms of framing, in terms of making sure that you get the best shots possible. I don't know how much time you're going to have to do that kind of thing unless you get a day before to look at your locations. If you do, pay attention to that. Watch how the light falls on people. Are there overhead sodium vapors? Is it a big field of light, or are there specific downlights that somebody can be in or out of? Those are the things that a cinematographer would look at before when they're assessing the scenes.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, in this instance, Andre is talking more about cinematography than he is actually camera operation, because he will be personing one camera, but there will be around about 4 different camera ops across the 2 different teams. So Andre is going to be keeping the overview for both teams of what it should look like, what it should be exposed for, what the LUTs are designed as, what is the overall camera grade and things like that. So I think that's really the area that he's looking for. So for me, it's about camera testing beforehand. We'll be on site for a couple of days ahead. So what should we be? What kind of camera tests should we be doing? What kind of color cards should we be putting in front of it? What should the look of IBC be? Whenever we're also combining it with panelists who are on Zoom.
You go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, as I do not have a role in the IBC field team yet, I can be your bodyguard. Nobody will step in your build.
Exactly. That's
important
perfect.
role.
We used to put them on both sides of our shoots to make sure that nobody walked through. Next question.
Next question from Nick Batt in the UK. What's the longest USB-C cable you could run for an Insta360 Link or any other USB-C camera?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think the spec on USB 3 is only about 10 meters, about 30 feet with that amplification. And the problem with that USB-C on that particular camera is it's doing like triple duty. It's sending power to the camera, and it's sending high-def video back from the camera, and it's sending control signals back to the camera. So it has to be bidirectional in its amplification if you get an amplified cable. And it would be unidirectional. So I'd be careful in experimenting with amplified cables or unidirectional cables because they may not work correctly with that. So I'd say 10 feet or less.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm with Courtney. I think 10 feet I can't buy anything over 6 feet, but then again, I'm buying Thunderbolt 4, so that seems to be the number.
I think 3 to 4 meters is probably the longest you'll be able to run that, in my guess. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. So if somebody was goofy enough to buy the Insta-Link and already had the obsbot 4K, would it be worth popping it in tomorrow's test?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely jump on and let's see what we got. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama. Guy noticed YoloLiv Instream is now available for pre-order. Seems like their overpriced TV replacement for Instagram. What are your thoughts on this? Is this the answer to not breaking terms of service?
Good Guy.
Yeah, it is an expensive device. It's over $1,200, but it is an Android native device, so it doesn't break any kinds of terms of service. So if you have a big enough reason, a big enough audience to jump in front of, 16:9 vertical or 9:16 vertical video is maybe the future. So this thing offers 2 HDMI inputs along with USB. So if you need to add graphics, it's got a little graphics like logo place where you can store these graphics like a still store and then add them in. So again, if you have the audience and it's worth it to you, it's worth it to you. But it is a way of dodging that TOS if you don't want to use Yellow Duck.
It's really interesting. And does it have is it an HDMI input? Oh, HDMI.
2 HDMI inputs along with it. You can also throw a USB camera in there. So it's basically a YoloLiv. It's a little switcher. Mm-hmm. It's just like their other devices where you can switch between multiple cameras, and that gives us access, to these higher end cameras. So, or if you want to use an ATEM or your traditional production flow, convert SDI to HDMI. So it's a pretty cool device, but it's just, do you have enough reach? Because this isn't just for, it can be for TikTok as well. So,
it's anything that does the dumb, no RTMP thing. Yes.
So, I mean, the audience is growing in that area. I'm hearing numbers of over 50% that we're seeing, cable getting passed up. So if 9:16 and watching on TikTok and watching on YouTube and Instagram.
No, I agree with that. I think it's just dumb that they make it so hard to stream. Like they make the whole thing. That's dumb. The actual platforms make sense. And I think a lot of TikTok creators make a lot of their money on the live streams. That's, because people donate money during that. That's kind of an old vestige of Musical.ly, which is where TikTok came from. And so people are able to dump money into that system. And so that is it's really good. I mean, we've talked about using some kind of Android device to do this for at least 5 years. And so I think YoloLiv might have come up with a really good solution for this. So we should see if we can get one, see if we can test it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned that DirecTV Dish would almost likely accept an SRT stream as a source to uplink from. Mimo Live can take SRT sources in via FFmpeg, but can only send RTMP out. What hardware would you use to send an SRT stream to them?
Yeah, it wouldn't be direct. You wouldn't send an SRT you'd send it to somewhere for direct or dish or any kind of satellite, but you would be delivering it to a satellite uplink that would convert that SRT back to baseband and then be encoded. So there wouldn't be you would use SRT to just pass it through, and there's lots of encoders. For us, it would most likely be SRT from AWS would probably be the solution. We would, because we're already encoding there anyway. So we would just be sending the program out if we want to put it on satellite. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I wonder how Roland can continue to justify their astronomical prices for 4K video switchers in comparison to Blackmagic. Are they not getting crushed in the market? The V600 UHD 4K switcher is almost 16,000 Canadian.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's a time and place for everything. And, Blackmagic is winning. If you look at the size of their football field size NAB booth, they're definitely dominating the market. But there is something about being able to have like in a rental or a ballroom type situation where you just plug it in and it works. So you don't have to add a computer. And so traditionally the scalers have been built in on every channel. And that's what we're starting to see with the ATEM Mini and the Constellation line is if the scalers are in there. So again, there's a time and place for everything. And these guys are developing these things for multiple screens. So being able to have multiple IMAG screens and control those as well as confidence monitors and loop things in and out. So those were Roland wins. And those things are, let's see, he has that model, the 600 UHD, it's on heavy back order. So there's a lot of pre-orders on that unit. So they are selling.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times we think about the buyer's market because we a lot of us here buy a lot of gear, but there's a huge rental market. And this is definitely, I think, aimed more towards the AV rental market where Blackmagic actually doesn't do that well. Because their products aren't as expensive, the rental numbers are much, what a rental house will make from a switcher, a Blackmagic switcher is much lower. And it also takes a little bit more to understand how it works and everything else. And so Blackmagic is not used as much in rental markets as we see other things because a lot of times the rental houses want something that has a higher MSRP. So I think that it probably does, as Guy said, probably does pretty well in a rental market where you're going to pay, $500 a day or something to use it for your event or $300 a day, whatever that is, to make that work. And it doesn't require, as Guy said, other computers there. Now, I do think that it is hard. I don't see how anyone is going to, potentially vMix is probably the most competitive with Blackmagic in a lot of ways, but they sold hundreds of thousands of those these little ATEM minis. And what that means is there's just a lot of people in the ecosystem. And so it means that it's become extremely easy to find people who can use Blackmagic switchers. They're becoming in one part of the market, kind of the standard. And so there's other standards out there for bigger broadcast and so on and so forth. But it just depends on how much they move up that market. But it's definitely changed. COVID and the ATEM minis changed the whole ecosystem forever. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I've heard from some people that have said that the build quality isn't there on Blackmagics, although they're very robust and they have a lot of features. So I don't know if anyone's heard any or can speak to that. But I had a Roland rep that actually showed me how they manufactured the products, and even the V1 HD Plus switcher that I'm looking at is far more expensive than an ATEM switcher, but it's made out of solid metal. And he even pointed out how they mount the HDMI ports, how they're bolted on. They're not, they're very secure. You can unplug and plug in an HDMI cable many times without worrying about that HDMI cable coming off the circuit board. Little details like that.
My whole thing is I can buy a lot of Blackmagics for $16,000. So that's but again, we routinely had primary and backup routers, primary and backup switchers, primary and backup, all kinds of things within our systems that we could never do with a more expensive switcher or more expensive routers and everything else. And so being able to do primary and backup or have secondary or be able to serve those things is a pretty big advantage when the hardware itself is a lot less expensive. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What's the greatest color scanner there is that will digest anything you chuck into it and have incredible throughput? Think multiple trays and hoppers.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know about it. Depends on what you're trying to scan. If you're trying to scan photos, Epson makes one. It's called the FT640. It's about $1,000. It scans about 1 photo per second, which is pretty fast. But I don't think you can mix sizes in there. You design the hopper, the auto feeder to a specific size, and it will go through them. I don't think it has multiple hoppers. I also found this one from Brother, which is a duplex scanner. It's designed for scanning documents. So especially if you have documents that are printed double side, it scans both sides of the document in one pass, and it'll take 60 pages per minute, so 1 page per second, and that'll give you 120 copies per minute because it scans both sides. But that's what I came up with. There are probably industrial type scanners that are designed for ingesting, stuff for libraries, things like that, pages for libraries that use strobes and some type of auto document feeder that somehow handles different shaped material and does auto, corrects keystoning and everything electronically. But those get up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I have a office-based Samsung, I think they call it Pro Expression. It's got a dock feeder on it. And this thing is, what I like most about this, it's full color and it does laser as well. I can throw a 100-page document in there. It scans it in probably 30 seconds. But it's automatically fed into my Dropbox. So everything that I scan automatically feeds directly into my Dropbox. Fantastic.
It's kind.
For the Graham Kerr film, we had a lot of slides and, of course, a lot of archived stills. And so I put a post in the group there in the chat for a Epson, which has the ability to take the slides. It does a translucent or transparent scanning light on top of it. So that was, it also gave us a really large dot pitch, a DPI, so that we can overscan the image and make it whatever size we want and move around in it. Ken burns it.
Good, Bill.
And if you're purely looking for paper, these are all great things. If you want to scan a variety of things, you say anything, you chunk into it. I had a client once upon a time who did 1,000 auctions a day on eBay, and they had a system of 10 tables. Each table had lights. They had a flat white surface with an infinite background, and they used digital still cameras. And literally, they could put anything, any object of any size, including things that were printed, and just move the camera, take a snapshot, went into the server. So that's if you're looking for 3D.
Next question.
Rodrigo Munez from Stockholm, Sweden. Hey, Alex. Is that a new microphone you've got there? What is it, and why did you change?
So I've been testing lots and lots of microphones, and one of the ones I tested was Courtney's. Courtney has a Stellar X2, and I tested it, and Mickey said that it sounded better than the one I was using before. So this is it's much less expensive, $199. It doesn't say anywhere in its PR. Courtney says it's built to sound like a U87. Is that right, Bill? Courtney, is that the
K67 diaphragm? Yeah, which is like the one that's used in the U87. Yeah.
Yeah. So so anyway, I think it has a lot of good detail. I think that it's a little less tubby than the one. It's still a little tubby where I have it or whatever, but it's a little less so than what we had before. It's $200, and so part of it is also me figuring out like how I want to use it, and it's different than the other one. And it's black, which means that if I wear a black shirt, you can barely notice that it's even there. so it's kind of a nice way to kind of subtly drop it in there. I do think with the way my room's set up, I don't think moving it out of the frame would sound as good. I mean, I think I'd end up hearing a lot more room. So that's why I don't do that. But yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
They do have this microphone doesn't work. No, they do have the X3 out.
The X3 out, yeah.
Yeah, and it just adds a low frequency roll off and a 10 dB pad, but it's basically the same capsule, I think. And they're very handcrafted. That's the one thing. They're not turned out of a factory in China. They're made in Irvine, California.
Yeah, it's definitely a solid mic.
Each one is very, and it has an iron body for it, which is unusual. So it cuts down on hum noise, keeps the self noise down quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I did get the other. I only have it kind of plugged in here. This is the Tom, the T-Bone with the USB. I do have some concerns that we'll test it on another day, maybe on Sunday or something like that. I don't think that it has enough amplification on the USB, so we'll see. I think it was a little too quiet, but we'll see. So I've been testing lots of mics. We're just trying to figure out what we send out to people cost effectively to make sure that we get the best sound. I actually think that in some cases, we might try to send something like this out to some people to be on shows and stuff like that. The big problem is that it's super sensitive. So if they don't have a good room for it, it would take a lot of posts to fix it. Next question.
And Rodrigo is back with another question. Looking at this produced by NFP clip with GV cams, what do you think? Is the video pipeline HDR, 4K downscaling? There's a link.
And we have to look at. It's hard for us to look at links during the thing. So, yeah. I'm not sure exactly what I should be looking at there. It looks like a HD. I mean, I think it's probably just 1080p, on the way out. But it looks like a nice screen. There's a nice LED wall. You don't see a lot of other issues there. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I had a chance to just quickly look at it beforehand, and I'm afraid I can't answer the pipeline question. But one thing that I find weird is that the lower third graphics are moving. They're not intentionally moving, as in they're kind of wobbling quite a lot. So if you watch as the speaker comes on now and her lower third comes up, you'll see a lot of reverberation. I'm just wondering where that is coming from.
Whoa.
Sweden consumes one of the largest.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that, so now I don't even think it's 4K. I think that what we're looking at there is a 1080i that is being converted to 1080p. And what you're seeing in the text are the fields going back and forth. And so whatever they're using what they're using to convert that is most likely an older deinterlacer is most likely what's there. I've never seen quite so much of it. Usually it's just rough, but that might be an older, like an analog way. In Europe, for some reason, analog ways are really popular. And so an analog way deinterlacer, I think, might actually do that. What we learned over time, what a lot of hardware manufacturers learned is something that Apple figured out before them, which is that it's easier to scale a lower resolution image than it is to deinterlace the images. And so what a lot of these systems do is just throw one of the fields away. just throw a field away. It basically has this half frame that is 540 by 1920, and then it just scales it. And it actually, most companies now, when you look at deinterlacing, they're not deinterlacing. They're just throwing the deinterlace is throwing one of the fields away and scaling it up, scaling the remainder up. And that's it produces a cleaner image. It's still soft. That's why we recommend not doing it. But it looks like deinterlacing. Next question.
Autobots transform. Getting in character for Paul Valhus's question from Austin, Texas. Optimus or Optimus Subprime, the humanoid robot, is set to roll out on September 30th at AI Day in Austin. Will it turn the whole notion of economy on its head? Elon Musk.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, it will turn the whole notion of economy on its head, because you'll have to be a super billionaire to afford one. And so you have to earn a lot of money. And if you see Elon reaching for that ludicrous button on the back, I'd run. But it can probably do 0 to 60 in like 0.5 seconds.
Still a long way away. like let's be clear. Like, everyone gets excited. You can see what the future looks like. The idea that a humanoid would do better than just building another machine that does the thing it needs to do is, I think the humanoid thing is good for servants, but generally when you're, a lot of these car companies, like when they talk about the car, they have people doing what they have to do right now because they have to make a bunch of critical decisions that it's going to take a while for the machines to do. The rest of it's all done by machines now. If you look at a car company, most of it's machines. And then if you look at like the Apple, their Pro, system that builds the Pro computers. I mean, it's like 10 people in there, and then there's just this massive amount of things being generated. I personally watched a machine replace a lot of people at one time. I worked at an electronics company when I was just out of high school, and I was building mainframes and first started in shipping and receiving. And the interesting thing was that when it was a big lesson in economics for me. They moved the minimum wage from, I think it was $3.25 or $3.50, which is what we were all getting paid, up 25 cents to like $3.75 or $4 or whatever it was at that time. And it broke some kind of amortization math that they had done. And they brought in a surface mount machine and laid off 25 people because they said it had to pay itself off in a certain amount of time. And once the minimum wage went up by 25 cents, it was enough to replace a whole bunch of people. So a lot of that has to do with labor costs as well. So as we move these, a lot of the stuff is energized. A lot of the automation is energized by higher minimum wages because it allows you to amortize some of the machine costs faster. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. What causes moiré on a camera recorded picture? How do webcams prevent showing it?
Good, Stefan.
Yeah, I'm using the new Insta360 Link right now, and I recognized it does a lot of more moiré on the screen than my Brio, for example, and I have to question where that comes from.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I've been waiting 6 months for somebody to ask this question.
Moiré. Of course. That was it. That's his only answer there.
Wow.
Yeah, go. Did you have anything else to add to that, John? No. Go ahead, Tlaloc.
So the best way that I have to describe this is in theater, we use a thing called a scrim. And a scrim is essentially a piece of fabric with a bunch of holes in it with cross mesh. If you put two of those together, and you look at it, you get this moving sort of crazy moiré effect. And so it actually is the way in which two cross hatches interact with each other. It's physics. And so what's happening in this case is you have a crosshatch in your camera and a crosshatch in your monitor, and so those two crosshatches. And when I say crosshatches, it's a simple way of saying the way that the pixels line up. And so that's where that's coming from.
Tlaloc did a very good job of that. It is a mismatch in the resolution of patterns that causes frequency problems when you digitize those two conflicting patterns. Used to be epidemic on television in the early days of color. Somebody's tie would just crawl on standard definition broadcast. It's a little easier today because of high definition and more resolution, but it's still an issue. And if you see it, applying a little bit of Gaussian blur to one of the two patterns can make it go away.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Right. It's basically a beat frequency between the two frequencies of dot pitch between between the monitor and between the camera, or between the monitor and the transmission media. And so between the camera sensor and the transmission media. So what can be happening in that Insta360 is it's scaling that 4K sensor down. And in doing that, it may be creating, not even multiples of the output pitch of the pixel pitch. So to avoid moiré, you have to it's worse at certain multiples. So 2 times is okay, 4 times is okay, three times is not okay. So if they're scaling it down just proportionally, they have to avoid certain proportions that create the beat frequencies, which are going to generate noise in the image.
And I think it depends. So I'm looking at you. Can you move around a little bit? I don't see.
I've recognized it at my background. So at the
I don't see. So what I don't see is moiré. What I see is compression. So when I look at what your background looks like, what I think that you may be talking about here is not so much moiré. Moiré will be typically curves that you'll see going across it. But what I see when I look at your background at full screen, at full size, is I see compression artifacts. And so that is a different problem. There's not enough bit depth to control. And we both have this problem. This is the one problem with the gray screen. If you're not changing the gradient very much, and it's you have a huge amount of space area being covered by only a handful of pixels because we're only doing 8 bits. So there's 8 bits. If we're only doing 8 bits of image, which is what we're getting here, and we're compressing that, basically what happens is that we only have 256 stairs to go from black to white. We have 256 stairs to go up those. But if we got something that's very gray, we only have about 25 stairs because we're only using this little piece here. Now, if we had If we had 10-bit, we would have 100 stairs to get between what was 25, right? Because it's got 4 times as many. And so what happens is that it's got to cover this entire area with 25 things. And so you end up with it stretching that out. And what you start to see is, and you'll see this at any gradient that you do in 8-bit in Photoshop or something like that, you're going to see stair stepping. Now, the other problem that you have is that when it's doing the compression, first it does temporal compression. It says, what is changing here? And it tries to be efficient about that. But when it runs out of that, especially at 1080p, it's now going to go, I'm going to now do spatial compression, which means I'm going to look at everything around me and try to clump them together so that I don't have to send so many bits. So all these are pretty close to each other. Let's throw them out there. And so at 1080p, what we end up with is clumping a lot of things. And we tend to call that macro blocking. And so what I see a lot of on your gray screen, and I see it on mine, and it's why I'm considering other things behind me in the future, is I see a lot of macro blocking, and you'll see it. They look like little squares that are on either side. That's not moiré as much as it is, it's throwing away data. It's kind of good for us in the foreground because it's throwing away so much data in the background that we look really good. What really gets you in trouble is big camera moves with lots of complex stuff in the background. So if you have a lot of stuff going on and it's moving, like we had one where someone had bushes in the background that were blowing in the wind, and they would turn completely like big squares all over them because there was nowhere to go. There was nowhere to throw. The algorithm didn't know what to throw away. So it just threw away the thing that wasn't moving very much, which turned out to be the person. And we see this. Yeah,
that's not a woven cloth background, is it, Stefan, behind you? Because then it could be moiré. But if
I just don't see moiré. When I pop moiré. Stefan up to full screen, I don't see moiré. I see compression. Like that's the blocks there that you see is not really a moiré. If it was moiré, you would see kind of these curves, of stuff that was there.
Encoding errors.
Yeah. So two things to add. One, we always look good on screens.
It definitely.
And the second question is, would more colored light help?
It might. It would give you more colors to work with. All right, we ran over. Sorry about that. The detailed discussion is something we think about a lot. So, but that was good. We are now jumping into our second hour, and we're going to be talking about Office Hours 2.0, where we are, where we're going, things that we're still working on. So I don't know who wants to, whether it's Richard or Tlaloc or Venice, who Josh, all these folks that are working on it. Does someone want to kick off and kind of give us a sense of where we are? We'll talk a little bit, then we'll take some questions, and we'll talk a little bit more. Go ahead, Tlaloc.
So I just want to first of all say what an amazing team to be working with all the time and building this thing and having ideas and trying things out, and just it's a pleasure. And we've been working on things. We work on things all the time. We move forward and then we step back, and then we move forward and we step back, and it's good. And since the last time we spoke, which I think was on April 29th, we've added a lot actually, and without really having it be so visible, because it's also adding to stability. But we have added a new way of working with the globe. We have full lower thirds control, which means that they're not on all the time, and we can turn them on and off in a really sort of clean way. We have, I don't want to just ramble all of this off because we're going to get through some of this stuff, but we've also utilized the entire Constellation switcher. So instead of just using ME1 for the main switch and ME2 for the active speaker, we're now using ME3 to have the smart gallery with mortises, and we're using ME4 for graphics. We have tally worked out in a way that I hope that a lot of the panelists are really enjoying, in terms of being able to see when they're on camera, when they're in preview, and when they're not in anything, to give them a chance, or us a chance to have a drink, or not be fully engaged with the camera for whatever reason that may be. We have a new mic check super source that allows us to see the meters as well as have the framer. And so, as you can tell, a lot of work is happening. And I think that
I've definitely noticed that it's a lot smoother. Like I keep on looking at it because I've been in this thing, like I'm going to put it out to a whole bunch of other channels and everything else. Every time I see a glitch though, I go, well, we need a couple more weeks. Like it's so it's like, you know, to like, cause I want to put our best foot forward when we put it into some of the other platforms and so on and so forth. And so, but I see that less every single week. I see, you know, less glitches, less things that surprised us, less, you know, it just keeps on getting smoother and smoother.
Yeah. And there's a whole laundry list of things that we're working on and making even better. But the way that this process is working, then I'll stop talking for a bit. But the way that this process is working is we're live. We're making a show. So as you guys, the producers and audience who watch this, see things that they want to be a little different or better, the requests will come in, and we have to sort of gauge that against what we're doing. Because if we make a big change and then get pushed back into Alex's pushing it another 2 weeks, then it's really hard. So because of, you know, it's a very complicated layered thing, and so each thing we have to think about very carefully. But we'll get into some of the things we're working on soon. I'm going to give Richard a chance here.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
I think it's Dennis actually is going to come in next.
I had Dennis next, and then Tlaloc threw it to Richard. I was like, okay, let's go there. So anyway, so go ahead, Dennis.
Thanks. So Tlaloc briefly mentioned the fact that we've now got graphics on ME4, and that means that we now don't have to worry about the upstream key being left on by accident and ending up with camera over Alex's face, for example, which has happened on air before. Basically, we now have separate control of the graphics, so we can decide exactly what's going to be on graphics, and it's just ready for the TD to take from a single button. This has meant a few changes to the TD stage. If Kirsten can bring that graphic up now, please. So the stage now has some extra buttons. I did show an older version of this, I think, last time we spoke. So you can see on the right-hand side of the graphics heading, we now have a dedicated graphics button, which puts ME4 into preview, so you can take that. We can also trigger the globe directly.
I want to back up just 1 second for those who haven't seen this before. Go ahead and put that graphic back up again. This is a web page. Like, this is a web interface. The universe is producing this interface. This talks back to Isadora. So anybody, you know, with a login can log in and actually run the show from anywhere in the world, which I think is something that if you haven't, I mean, again, we haven't talked about this since April. We might have a lot of new viewers. I just want to kind of back up, and you guys can talk to it if you want to, but a little bit of the magic here is that it's not just that, we have something we can do in a room. We have something that can be done anywhere. Now go ahead, Dennis.
Absolutely. Thanks. So again, the fact that we now can take those sources directly from where they are in the ATEM switcher means that we're not using up some of the 20 slots we have for panelists. Initially, when we started introducing these things, we were just dropping them into the numbers that we already had buttons for on the interface. And it meant that would reduce the number of panelists we could actually have because we were using some of those slots. The Constellation has 40 different slots, though. So we've got 20 of those dedicated to panelists, but the other 20 can be whatever other items we want to display. And as we add those things, we can now add additional buttons into that web interface, which means that we have direct control over exactly what we're taking rather than, as I say, using up some of the slots that would otherwise be for panelists.
Yeah, that's great.
One other thing I can show you is the graphics interface. So, Kirsten, if you can bring that up. This is, again, another universe stage that can be operated from anywhere in the world.
So this could be done by the same person, or potentially another person could just go in there and start building it out.
It could indeed, yeah. Generally, it is a different person. Most of the time, at the moment, I'm doing the graphics, or sometimes JJ or Josh. And so this is the interface that we use to decide what's going to be on that graphics button for the TD. And then it will be ready for them just to take whenever they want to take it. A couple of other things that we have changed, and that these are also available from the graphics interface, are that because we are beginning to do some more HDR tests, we need to think about not leaving high brightness things on screen for a long time. So Tlaloc already mentioned we've now got full control over the lower thirds, so we can bring those in and out when we want. And we have established a sort of rule of thumb that we don't want them on screen for more than about 10 seconds at a time. So we're not risking burning those into people's monitors. And likewise with the gallery, where we have that mortise, we've got the bright blue outlines around everyone's shots. There we go. You can see it now. And so, again, we don't want to leave that on screen for too long in case it's going to start damaging people's monitors.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, again, we're swallowing an elephant. So, as we try to do this, is that it's not only we're trying to do it remotely, it's not only that that we're doing something no one's ever done before, but let's do it in HDR 4K 5.1. But it allows us to learn and allows us to figure out, we're now conscious we have to be careful about HDR. We have to be careful. We have to think about how we're going to go do HDR and SDR. And these are things that only a handful of production companies are thinking about right now, because there's not a lot of delivery, and it's going to be kind of normal for us within the next year. Go, Dennis.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that we have introduced since the last time we spoke is the fact that we now drive all our graphics through SPX. Now, when we started adding graphics in, I was just always sending those over Zoom. So if there was any keying over a background, I was doing that on my ATEM and then sending it over Zoom. And obviously that will have a resultant loss of quality in the process. But now we have an SPX instance actually connected directly to the constellation, which I can control, or anyone else doing the graphics can control. So that means that not only are we not getting the loss of quality that Zoom is imposing on the image, we can also do it directly in 4K. And key it over the supersource background that's being generated within the hyperdeck that's playing out that video. So as a result, all our graphics are going to be much higher quality.
Yeah, and it's really complicated. What we're doing is, because some of the stuff is 1080p, but our goal is to be HDR 4K, and as we go down that path, there's a couple other pieces. We're waiting for a little bit of hardware to show up. It's been back ordered. That once we do that, we'll be able to color correct every individual person in this panel individually in HDR and SDR. And so, we'll do it all in HDR, and then we'll down convert to SDR 1080 for the general stream. So if you're watching, you'll see kind of a reconverted version, and that'll take us a little while to figure out. But then there'll be a test version that's sitting in HDR that we can look at in 4K. But it's thinking about the pipeline. It's complex. And eventually we want to get to the point where any kind of video playback and everything else is all local to the machine. And this also comes into, if we're using a live view. I don't know what we're going to do for IBC, but as we go look at some of the next coverage and some of the other things we may do with live views, they're capable of HDR 4K and 8 channels of audio. So we may be playing with the idea of taking those on the road and being able to deliver those back, but we couldn't do that through Zoom. We would need to do it directly into the switcher. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis. Anything else?
Yep. So I thought I'd quickly show you the SPX interface, as we've not seen that on the show before. That's in graphics now. And so this is where we, for example, play the credits from. They are all created within a Google Slides document. So it's a multi-page document, and we just turn off the pages we're not using at a particular time. For example, if we have lots of panelists, we may need to go to a 2-column list of panelists. So we have separate slides already laid out for all of that. We just turn on and off which ones we're using at the time. Chad is busy updating throughout the show the list of producers who asked questions, and of course the Tlaloc reversal. The rest of the credits get done generally by me before the start of the show. I'm seeing who's coming on stage and just noting them down in the panelist list as they come on. One last thing we have is, again, part of SPX, and it was developed specially for us by Tuomo, which is the image list plugin, which you can see now. And this is how all of the static image graphics get done. I can create those. I initially started using Keynote to do it when I was sending it over Zoom, and I've carried on using Keynote because the Instant Alpha tool just makes it so easy to get transparency on the images. But then I output them as a PNG, upload them to a web server, which this plugin is then talking to, and we can just go through the folders of images that we've added and select the right one and play it out through the graphic system.
It's fantastic. And Tuomo's been incredibly helpful with all of the graphics. And we went from SPX not being something I can remember what the letters are to every time someone asks me, well, I'm trying to do these graphics. I'm like, oh, just use SPX. It's going to be a lot easier there. Go ahead. Richard, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just one of the nice little things to show the complexity of kind of what's been happening over the last couple of months is the open show, which if Alex, do you want to describe what your request for the opening of the show was?
So I wanted to go to black because it's easier to cut. It's easier to edit it's easier to cut it later if you have a black frame somewhere so that we come up from something. The problem is that at first it was slow. So it was like 3 seconds down and then 3 seconds up. And I don't want to be sitting there for 3 seconds as the host. I want it to go slowly down to slowly tell us we're going there and then come up really fast so that I just, I want to be on a black frame for, a couple frames. Then I want it to come up really quickly so I can start talking. Then I asked, but the first version of this was fast down, fast up, which then threw me off. like I literally lost my train of thought. I was like, I don't understand what I'm going to do. And so now it is a more complicated auto, which is that it is going. I know this seems simple, but I know it's not. Like I know that it was not simple at all to do what they did, which is a slow fade out and then a fast fade up, because it's a different auto speed now than one is different. So you want to explain how that happened, Richard?
Yeah, so that is 7 different OSC commands given within a few, less than a few seconds. It could be instantaneous within milliseconds of each other, but because of the 3 seconds down, what that tends to be is that, and I can show this to some degree, where the first command is setting the transition rate, the next command is setting so as in the speed of the transition. The next command is sending the transition type. The next command is previewing black. So it goes from the countdown clock into black. The next command then actually triggers the transition. The command after that then highlights the host of the show, whether that's Liberty, Bill, or Alex. The next command changes the actual transition rate back to a shorter speed, and then the next command transitions it between the black to the host. So that is 7 different OSC commands within a few seconds to get that the idea that would be done by a person is really hard. That is a really hard thing to do as a TD or as any type of caller, is to change those transition speeds whilst they're sort of happening.
Especially in the cloud, because normally you'd have you'd use the T-bar and you'd come down slowly and then go back up again and make the switch. But this is much, as you said, much more complicated, especially online. Go ahead, Tlaloc.
I just wanted to point out, because I saw Richard showing the work that goes into the actual universe side of things, and I want to shout out Richard for the amazing work he's done on that. And on top of that, there's a lot of settings that the switcher has that you make a choice on it, and then it's in that spot, right? Like, let's say you turn the DSK on. Mm-hmm. You may not be able to see anything with the DSK on. So one of the things that I kind of have been harping on for 6 months is feedback to Universe that allows us to know the true state of the switcher. And we're not connecting directly to the switcher, which Universe can do, but we're not doing that here for stability reasons. We're going through Isadora. So we need a way for that communication to be bidirectional. So thank you very much, Adam Tao. He made it work so we could get some information back from Mix Effect, and then that goes into Isadora, and that goes back out to Universe, and we're chipping away at that process.
Well, and I think that what's really interesting, I just want to do a call out as well, is all the vendors that have been working with us to make this work. Adam Tao, the Universe team, the Isadora team, everyone is, making these, SPX, of course, Tuomo. We have a lot of developers who are not just allowing us to use their software, but actually making changes that we need to make this work. Because again, I think that, we're still way out. This is like way out in the bleeding edge of building virtual events. But I think we're getting close to something that a year from now is something that possibly a lot of us and a lot of other people are going to be using for their shows. And I think that, we're paving the way for that. And we want to keep on talking about it because we're not trying to hold it as our little secret. We want other people. We want to make doing shows via Zoom something that is just normal. Like, oh yeah, we could do that. We could have discussion groups. There's a lot of people that would do discussions, and we've built a lot of the tools that are necessary, and we're figuring it out. Taking a lot of taking a lot of water sometimes, but I just want to lay out that this is one is just an acknowledgement of everyone, from the volunteers that are learning how to do it to the folks that are building it to the vendors. It's a huge operation. Like, it's not something that 3 people are working on. There's 20 or 30 people that are involved with making this work on a week to week or month to month basis, that are making all of these things happen. And but I also want to invite other people. I mean, this is going to be a big deal when we get this. When this gets to be smooth and automatic, this is a lot of. I think it really changes the way we do discussions globally, and not just us, like a lot of other people, because I think that companies will eventually make these more refined. The tools that we're hacking together right now could eventually become a product on its own that it just ties it all together. So it's really interesting. Yeah, Tlaloc, did you want to add anything?
Just to finish up that, that means now we have DSK truth in the universe. We have we actually have preview truth, but not quite program truth in the buttons, in the direct preview buttons. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too far down the weeds on that, but it's something I really find to be kind of the most important thing right now, is to just get that feedback to be even better. And we have requests out to Adam on some things, and we'll see. But it's like it's an important thing, and it can allow us to do other things. Like, okay, we need to know for sure that the super source is in program. And then when we know that for sure, and there's no delay on knowing that, we can do things like put lower thirds there or whatever. So, those are some of the things that are really important to me.
And I think that one of the reasons that we're able to make this work also is that we're doing it every day. And we're experimenting with things on the weekend. Sometimes I get surprised, don't handle it well, but we're experimenting with things on the weekend. We are doing every day. I think it's why it works is because we have a huge crew, and that crew is changing. People are coming in and out. If you had the same people cutting the show, they would build habits around the deficiencies of the system. It's the fact that there's new people coming in that we have to explain it to, that are going to do it differently, that allows us to see where the holes are. And again, I think that there's very few organizations, maybe none, that could do this other than us. So it is really a unique development process. And again, I'm already looking in the fall of how do we build more versions of, not do more hours of other things that are more, more vertical, so about a certain subject, but once a week or whatever later in the day. And, we're just trying to figure out how that would all look. But I think we're getting very close to having something stable enough to do that. So it's really exciting. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Kirsten Osterkamp from Germany. What are the key learnings from Office Hours 2.0 in terms of technical system design, which is enabling a global crew to co-produce this daily Office Hours show?
Go ahead, Dennis.
So I think the thing that made the biggest difference when it was introduced was having Unity comms. Because when I started working on cutting OH 2.0, I was just communicating with Andy and JJ over Discord. And actually being able to talk to people makes a huge difference. It makes things happen much more quickly. And it also builds a community. You know, the fact that we all get on comms and talk to each other every day. We've got a particular goal in mind. And, we're working together to achieve that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it is something that we've taken something that, this is going to be really cool, down to something that's almost normal. Like you just get up every morning and there's a show going on. And as I hand off more and more of this to other folks, I get more excited about it, because it's not quite as, and the fact that we have, and I just want to say, it's not just that we're cutting all these shows in 2.0. When you don't see this when you're watching the show, but when you, as a panelist, you come in and there is a crew of people who are welcoming us, making sure that we're ready to go, making sure that our little numbers in there, making sure that everything's working. And so we, it's a completely invisible team to someone watching the broadcast, but it is so nice. Like it's like this nice warm. It gets like everyone's there having a we're kind of warmed up and having a couple conversations, and it really sets us up for success. It's a really it's a great other thing that's going on all the time. And again, we have folks that are also, there's just a lot of it's invisible. Like we should probably, the next time we do this, which will be faster, we'll do it more than every 3 months. We definitely should outline all the different roles that are used, in Office Hours 2.0, because there are people who are managing the questions. There's people who are managing, who are looking at the chats. There are doing a lot of other bits and pieces. So it's a lot going on. Josh, by the way, is now, if you have second hour ideas, Josh is the person to talk to now. I don't know if people know that, but Josh is taking that over. Josh went from me was like, what am I doing next week, to now Josh has Josh had it for like a week, and suddenly there was a huge spreadsheet and all the days and everything else. And when I have to do a little email, which we're going to move to MailChimp soon, it was all like, all the descriptions are already there and everything's all set up. It's really been a huge change for me, for Josh to step in and start taking over the second hours. But if you have ideas, Josh is the person to talk to. He's the boss.
The multiple sheets are getting more concise. We're improving, streamlining all the time. Yeah. Speaking to the question about what we've learned, our community runs on volunteers. And so having them organized and know what needs are there is something that we've learned lessons on. Many people have, I've been doing the volunteer management, and a lot of people have been giving me their input about what's needed, the different forums, the management crews. So it's a whole community that needs managed, and the community is sort of managing itself in that regard. Some organizations helpful, which has helped us to get above the curve a little bit. So we're able to see ahead of time when needs are there as far as volunteers, but as Alex mentioned too, as far as the second hours, we're getting a larger view ahead about what's coming in the pipe. And the idea is that it's something that helps us to be a little more prepared and a little more poised for our spots, whether they're behind the camera, behind the scenes, or our guests as they're coming in. So we're still learning in that.
Well, and I think that one of the things that is that's happening here as well is that now this has gotten to be where it looks really good. The show's going well. And now that we start having some more organization about inviting more people in, you're going to see the second hours get, a lot denser, and with a lot more interesting things because we can. And again, the other thing that's going to happen is that Josh will need help soon to manage this. I didn't want to I've learned not to build big teams around people from day one, but I think that Josh has gotten enough organization now that we'll be looking for people to help, prep people that are going to come on and manage those bits and pieces and do research and so on and so forth. So stay tuned for some call outs for that. But if you're interested in working on the second hour team, go ahead and reach out to Josh for that. And I will say that just being on teams, I've worked on volunteer systems for, over 30 years. And I got to say that if you're looking for management skills, volunteers, doing a nonprofit and volunteer is the best way to learn how to do this, how to be a manager, because no one's there because they're getting paid. So everyone's there because there's and you have to keep the vision going. You have to keep being responsive. You have to keep all those things happening. And it's incredible. I mean, this is probably the most impressive volunteer group I've ever seen in my life. It's just really impressive, the work that's being done here every day. Let's go to the next question.
Juan C. Robles from Mexico City, Mexico. How are we doing with the planned 5.1 audio pipeline?
So it's up, and we're seeing little glitches here and there, but nothing major. We haven't been doing a lot of 5.1 yet. I needed to clear a computer, and we had to figure out exactly how we were going to handle that live. And so we're going to be testing it. I think our first pass at this is going to be testing using L-Acoustics, Elisa, to do the first round of this. There's some interesting things that Elisa can do. Not only can it do the live panning that we're talking about here, but it can also it's also capable of using OSC to export positional data of the objects. And so we think that we can tie that back into Isadora, so that you could, or even Unreal, and be able to, or in Unity, to be able to visualize some of the sound. So this may affect, where I see this affecting is our opening countdown clock, which I think will end up being generated by one of these things where you're hearing sounds and seeing things and, all kinds of other things that are going on. I really see that opening credit area as a lab area for us to play with 5.1, and then we'll keep on playing with what we do with it. But I think that I think we just got the computer. I had to find a computer that I could clear off and make available. And so I handed that to JJ yesterday. So Mickey now will have access to that, and we'll start to dig into it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, make sure that you remember that I'm in the back left channel and you're in the back right channel, Alex.
We're talking about having
discussion.
We're talking about putting Mitchell and I on the back left and back right, so we can heckle each other mostly. From your surround speakers, which may drive people. We would probably only do it on the weekends, so that it doesn't drive people crazy on the
credits.
Yeah, the credits. That's where the big argument will be. But Mitchell will have to learn how to whisper. Next question.
Kirsten Osterkamp from Germany. What's next in terms of RFI, room for improvement, which will lead to Office Hours 2.1?
I go to Tlaloc.
I think one of the biggest things that I hear from everyone is the way in which our active speaker cuts. And we've been working on it for a long time now. One of the things that with the refinement of, we have some gating in place. So if a switch happens, it will wait a certain amount of time before another switch can happen. But one of the things that we've realized now that that's in place is that Zoom looks at the last person to mute. So if you mute in a certain situation when another person is talking, it'll actually switch over to that other person. And so we need to make sure that we're not reinitiating that gate and slowing things down when people mute. And so we're actively working on that. And then I think also being able to scale up and down how much work is happening in the back end, depending on how many volunteers there are at a given point. Right. I think that's a huge thing. And then there's all kinds of other things that are in the constant, churning RFI. So we're working on a lot of stuff all at once.
Yeah. I know that one thing that we did with Hangouts when we were controlling Hangouts on Air through the plugin was that we ignored all of Google's pins to tell us what was going on, and we just looked at the volume. So we just stopped. We looked at the raw audio coming in and made our switching decisions based on that. Until we did that,
maybe eventually do that.
Yeah, until we did that, we never found a solution that worked until we just said we're just going to watch the audio coming in and take the loudest person. But then what we did is we had customization of the attack against that was the thing that fixed it for us. Mitchell.
Tlaloc, I'm interested in the muting because like Alex and Bill, I keep my mute unmuted, but I do it electronically with a very expensive 205 studio technology. So
yeah, we appreciate your contribution to the nice cutting of the show. Thank you.
Okay.
That's what,
so hardware mutes are a good thing, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because they're not switching on.
Not triggering anything else on the back end.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And we'll see if we can get a sponsorship by Studio Technologies and just send everybody a box.
There you go.
And you get a box, and you get a box, and there we go. All right, next question.
Raj Shandil from Los Angeles, California. When using Mukana as a panelist or question managing on Office Hours 2.0, what arrangement on screen has the team used to improve the speed efficiency of each show? Bonus points for new tips and tricks.
Go ahead, Dennis.
So I don't often do question management, but I think the layout that I use might be worth just talking through quickly. I can't show you it because I'm on the panel today and haven't set it up. But I have a total of 4 monitors around me plus a teleprompter. So I am in this semicircle of displays. On the leftmost one, I have both the Zoom instances. I'm connected on stage where I can send graphics if I need to, and then also to the control room where we can see the multi-views coming back from the constellation. And then I also have 2 instances of Mukana open, one that's looking at the questions that are on deck, so I can see what's coming up next and making sure that I've got graphics ready for it, and another which is looking at the voting queues, so I can see what's coming up, and when I have time in between doing things to get things ready for the next question, I'm also looking through the questions that are coming up and making sure that I have the graphics ready for those. On the next monitor, that's just a 1080p display. That's the one where I put any graphics I'm going to display over Zoom. So generally web pages or particular content that I want to display there, and I can just send that through my A10. And then I also have a playout B, which I can send any video content. So any videos people share in the questions, YouTube links, that sort of thing. I download the videos, put them on the playout B, and then I've got them ready to roll whenever they need to be played. As I think was mentioned earlier, we're hoping in the future to move that, like the static graphics, that will also go into the Office Hours Beast, where it will be able to be played directly into the constellation. So again, we get higher quality out from that. And then on my teleprompter, I have the program output, so I can see what's actually going out on the show. And then the monitor immediately to the right of that has all of the things I'm doing for researching graphics, preparing them, Discord, so I can see if people are messaging with graphics for me to add. And then the final monitor is actually connected to my A10, so I'm getting the multi-view from that.
Josh?
We'll have to do a behind the scenes so we can see all these monitors. That's where we've covered our confidential portions. I appreciate the tally light feature that we have. I really cherish my vertical resolution, so the option to have the note that I can put in a flexible spot is helpful to me. How I can use the regular Mukana interface. Laura is not here today, but it's just about efficiency and speed to your question, Rajan. She did want me to bring out that there's been some upgrades to the stability, just the way that the Mukana has worked. So we've worked on some of the bugs to get those out. Sometimes we're on different pages sometimes. So that can throw us off if everyone's not on the same page, so to speak. Also, there's been some move for accessibility for people to be able to read some of the, be able to do more screen reading too. So that's something that's helped out to keep everyone on board.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think as Dennis very well described, having a setup that you're comfortable with, where you can see everything you need to see, is very important. But I will say, for anyone who's thinking about joining, all you need is one screen, and it has to have the access to Mukana and the comms. It can be really simple. So I don't want to discourage people by thinking that they have to have lots and lots of monitors, a whole bank in front of them. It can be really simple. I've cut the show from a laptop, 16-inch laptop, with 3 things on the same screen, and it works really well.
Good, Tlaloc.
Yeah, I wanted to come in and say the same thing, just to sort of bookend what Dennis is saying. You can build your amazing sort of center of control, but the first step is to do it with one screen, because it's you who is going to decide how many extra screens you want. It's not us who should tell you that. You need to go in, you need to become question manager, you need to use it. You just say, oh, I really wish I had a button to do this. Then you need to become TD, and then you really wish I had a button to do this and see this. Okay, well then that's what you need. But it's not on us. I think one screen is where you start.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, BC, Canada. What is the impediment to implementing HDR on every office hour show? Additionally, does the YouTube Apple TV app support HDR?
It does. You should be able to see HDR there. We're waiting for a little bit of hardware that we need to kind of sync everything up. And part of that is also related to cost. So we want to make sure that all the pieces are available to us. One of the things that we've noticed when we just leave it all opened is that some images that look normal. So I can tell you just looking at this one right now, like if we did HDR today, Richard, who looks totally fine in standard dynamic range, as well as Bill, as well as Josh, would look very dark. Like, because what happens is the roll off is very different. So if your skin colors are just a little lower than everybody else, suddenly it just drops off and you look like and so we need to be able to control each person to be able to pump something up a little bit and then convert it to HDR, as opposed to having it all be the same. And we'll work on that a little bit more. We had some technical issues that slowed it down because for a while our link wasn't. It turned out our FS HDR that we were using wasn't. It was doing something to the signal that our link didn't like. So if we sent test signals, it was fine. If we sent video, it was not fine. And a firmware update finally fixed that. So we're back on. So we've been doing some quiet tests of figuring a couple of the pieces out. We're also doing some rewiring to get it ready to go. And then finally, again, there's a little bit of hardware. And the reason that we're waiting for the hardware, we could try to do the HDR, but it wouldn't be very viewable, I think, on its own. And one of the reasons that I'm kind of waiting for that is because it costs 10 times, not quite 10 times, 8 times more to stream the HDR. So per hour. So it turns into when we started doing the tests every day, we were doing that a year ago or almost a year ago. It's about, instead of being a couple dollars a day, it's, tens of dollars a day to turn it on. And since we do something every day, it becomes one of those things that we're still testing until I can also figure out how to pay for that. Because right now I pay the AWS bill. so it would be $600 to $1,000 a month to do it. So I'm just trying to figure that out before I turn it all on as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, could you see the addition of external control surface support to the 2.0 interface?
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, absolutely. It's something that I've wanted for a long time, being able to use a Stream Deck, for example, to cut the show. I was TD on Conversations with Tony Mobley on Wednesday, and they do have a setup with their vMix in the cloud solution where you can connect your Stream Deck up to it. And it just makes it so much easier than having to rely on clicking on buttons on the webpage. So it is possible. It's just a question of getting it all set up. Companion Satellite is the software that's needed so that you can basically take a companion instance that is controlling a Stream Deck on the machine in question and send that somewhere else in the world.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Wouldn't it be cool to have a Scarhoy that's specifically built for us that has the T-bar on it and everything? It would be neat.
Yeah, Tlaloc.
So I want to remind you that, with Conversations with Tony Mobley, there is a machine in the cloud that is only doing that. That is the only thing it does, and it is completely siloed, completely separate from anything else around it. So when we think about things that we want to do for 2.0, we have to be very conscious about how we get things in and out of that system for reasons that is not as siloed as it would be with a single instance in the cloud. So, it takes a little bit longer, but we'll definitely have that on the to-do list. So hopefully it's coming.
And I think being able to have the external, the main thing that we want to do is also make sure that we don't make it something that someone can't just do from anywhere in the world. As soon as we started adding hardware, I think being able to have hardware as an option that someone could get if they really want to do a lot of this is great. We want to make sure that always the interface is always the primary, that you can just simply tap screens and turn into a good show. Next question.
One of the nice things with the companion satellite is that you can just use the web interface to do it as well. So if you don't happen to have a Stream Deck, you can still use those exact same buttons.
Absolutely. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. What is the state of requiring 4K in office hours? With so many signals going through Blackmagic designed 1080 switchers, what's the benefit?
Go ahead, Tlaloc.
So it's not just the ATEM switchers, it's also Zoom. That's our shelf there when it comes to the resolution at this moment. And so, but if you have a full gallery of folks in a high resolution, you can have then a larger resolution of that entire look, and any kind of graphics and all that can come in much, much crisper. And so it's not the individual ones as much as it is the group when it comes to 4K. Yeah. And the switcher that we're using, the Constellation, is capable of 4K.
Yeah, and so it's actually capable of 8K if we really want to do it. That would be absurd. Maybe not until next year. Anyway, so the 4K super sources, as was laid out, look really, really nice. And again, we're building towards something that we know that the technology may catch up. There may be a point someday, years to come, that have 4K on Zoom or whatever we're using, and suddenly we're just able to do it. Like, it's not like now we have to do X, Y, and Z. We're like, we got this, And so we want to kind of build that way, throw the ball to where the receiver is going, not where they are. Next question.
And it's from Brandon Buttram from Indianapolis, Indiana. And Brandon asks, will there be an After Hours 2.0? What do you see that looking like? Maybe use Zoom OSC to automate co-hosting and sending a welcome message to new users via the Zoom chat.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm very concerned for Brandon because whenever I'm on, Brandon has a lot of time and is very busy sending up visual cues to me to calm it down or stop the comedy, or I'm going in the wrong direction. And it seems that should be automated because Brandon is a very busy boy when I'm on After Hours.
Yeah, exactly. We just have to have the Mitchell filter. That's Office Hours 2.0. After Hours 2.5 is the Mitchell throttle. Go ahead, Tlaloc. I can't hear you, Tlaloc.
It works better when I'm not muted. Some work has been done regarding Zoom OSC and chat and various things like that. I think that there is always going to want to be a human factor when it comes to hosting 2.0. I mean, After Hours, because we just need to sort of sense the room and feel the room, and it's important. So.
And I think that we're also you're starting to see it where you have Bill's going to be talking about Final Cut at noon. We have, Elle is talking about Isadora on Thursdays. Ken Jordan is talking about web on Wednesdays. David Paskin is talking about eCam on Tuesdays. And what we're starting to see here is that, we're starting to fill out labs and classes and other things in the, Guy did a great SRT, lab a couple weeks ago. And so all of those things, you're going to see more and more of that happening in After Hours, where we're taking advantage of that extra time. For the people, it may not make sense for us to broadcast it on YouTube, but it does make sense there's enough of us that want to learn it. There'll be more, we're going to be doing labs around some 3D stuff, around LiDAR, around other things like that in the coming months. And so we'll keep on picking up speed. And I think that one of the things, as we get the second hour kind of worked out, and Brandon has really been taking on starting to manage the after hours, which has been a huge lift off of my back as well. And so all these people are doing it, we can start thinking about things like having Brandon talk to Josh and figuring out, like, if we're going to do something about a certain subject on Tuesday, what if there's a lab on Thursday, that we saw it, you got to watch it, now you get to go and hang out and play with it. And so those are the kind of things that I think, integrating after hours time with office hours, second hours, and other interests, I think could be a really interesting way to use the platform. And so I think that's some of the stuff that you might see there as well. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and it's been amazing to me. I've done a lot of training and things like that on software, and I'm doing this thing on Final Cut. I have learned so much in the last 3 or 4 weeks of doing this, not just about the structure training, because I already knew a lot of that stuff. My wife is an instructional specialist, and she helps me keep on target for those kind of things. But understanding how it works in this new web-based world where the rules are a little bit different. We used to do these 30 and 40 minute training videos back in the old days, and everything's collapsed down to a smaller thing. Well, now the idea is, how do you packetize information so that you have a piece that works for a live interactive discussion, allow for that interactive discussion, and what does that look like moving forward? Because the old ways are dying and the new ways are coming in, and not to have a test bed to understand that is going to put me behind. And so this is an amazing opportunity for people who want to learn this new communication style of training into the web. It's just been fabulous. I'm going to redo the whole thing just because I've gotten so many ideas from practicing on those Fridays.
Yeah, absolutely. Sky?
Are these after hours classes being curated? Because I know I'm very interested in Bill's knowledge, and I would love to, brain suck on that, but I'm not available at noon today.
Sky, it's really interesting. I did not record the first 3 because, frankly, I was just doing it kind of as an off the cuff kind of thing. But as people started asking questions and I started realizing, okay, I'm doing this anyway, why don't I record it? And my first experience of recording was on lesson 4, I think. And I came back, and what Zoom had done in terms of capturing the work that I did looked so good that I went, wow, this is almost an automated program capture device now. And it gave me 3 different feeds and a whole bunch of things. And I just wrapping my head around that alone has been valuable.
Well, especially as we have a global audience, the time that we find is not everything is on the Pacific time zone. So
yeah. So I'm going to do all of them recorded from now on. And I'm just kind of feeling like I'm learning and just getting my feet under me with that.
And again, all of this is early days. We're figuring all this stuff out. This will get a lot more refined, as we go. It's just that we're allowing it to be something that happens organically rather than having a bunch of assumptions that we're just sticking out there. Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. How have the back-end changes impacted training processes?
Go ahead, Dennis.
So the training process has always been a matter of getting people in, particularly the weekends, where they can get hands-on with the interfaces and actually try cutting them, question managing the show for themselves. Where we've made changes, it means that people who come back to those roles, not having experienced the changes, just need a quick update on what additional things they now need to factor in, such as keeping the lower thirds off screen for the majority of time, knowing where to find the graphics and so on.
Yeah, Tlaloc.
I think it is an organic process, and we're building and changing the machine as we go. So, and a lot of those changes happen on weekends, and that is also when we train. So it's a little bit, for some, it has been frustrating because it's like we're figuring it out with them as they learn it. But on the other hand, you're getting the opportunity to understand how it works. Right. And you're getting to see the different layers of it because it's happening before your eyes. And so it's frustrating on one hand. I think it's impacted in that way that, like, oh gosh, I don't know what button to push because the button just appeared in front of me. And on the other hand, I think a lot of people understand more of how the system works for that reason.
And the one thing is that I think that eventually this is going to be some kind of service that people are providing, whether it's us or other people to other organizations, not just to us. It takes, it's not like, oh, I did 1 or 2 of these and now I'm ready to go. learning how to do this, getting into the cadence, getting into the process, really understanding how the show goes takes hundreds. Like, just so you know, like, it's like the people that get hired to do this are people who are training now and doing, you know, 10s or 20s or hundreds of shows. Like, that's how you end up in the front area and that's how you understand how this whole system works and how it all, you know, understanding it now. And so it's not, you know, it's not something you want to think about coming in and doing a show. Like, okay, I got that, or 5 shows or whatever. It's really figuring out how to do it, because I do think that, I don't know if it'll be our system, but there'll be systems that work like this. And the training, it's not just about learning how the buttons work. It's learning how to do the show and how to be on comms and how to think about graphics and how to think about what you're going to cut to and all the things to deal with and all the latencies that aren't going to change, regardless of what product it is. And so it's really important, if you are interested in this and you have the time to work on that right now, is I would highly recommend getting into it now rather than later. Next question.
Rajan Shandil from Los Angeles, California. When using the Office Hours 2.0 system for show control and technical direction, what equipment, screen setup, Unity, and mouse keyboard layouts have everyone who uses it found to be ideal?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, you can do this with a one-screen solution, but the ideal is to basically be able to see as much as you can in as high a quality as you can. So in the control room where the team are currently cutting the show, we have 3 different inputs into that control room. We have the multi-view for the show, we have the multi-view 16 that shows all of the panelists, and we have the program output. Now, you generally want to be able to see each of those in as large a screen as you can, so that you can do little simple things like tell whether the lower third graphics are accurate, tell whether, and that you need to see program to see that in the best way, because it's hard to see in the main multi-view. You want to see what the panelists are doing, so you know maybe who might give you a great reaction shot, or who might have gone dark because there's a technical issue. So generally you want to have as good a access to seeing as many things as you can at the same time. So that does start to move into the area of having either several monitors or several different ways to see things. So basically, as Tlaloc mentioned, it's led by what you need and what's going to work best for you. So some people, as Dennis mentioned, might prefer a physical kind of control surface. Some people might be happy with the universe surface shrunk down to a tiny size, and some people might want to use that on an iPad so they can sit back and have everything full screen in front of them. So there are a number of different configurations. I found for me, having it in one screen allows me to see 3 significant things at the same time. It allows me to see the multi-view, it allows me to see the control interface, and it allows me to see the panel, as in the questions coming up and who has their hands raised on which question. So having eyesight of as much information in as concise a way as possible is usually the best way to do it for me.
Yeah, good, Dennis.
So I already talked about my screen setup, but in terms of controlling the computer, I have my Stream Deck in my left hand, which currently I just use for comms, because it means I can talk to people direct. I can select which party lines I'm talking to, and I've got my my mouse in my right hand, which is I'm using for obviously controlling the computer and cutting the show if I'm cutting the show. One other thing I do have, which again is specific to graphics, is I've got a second computer which is specifically running the slideshow for the graphics. So if we have some problem with the primary graphic system, we've got a backup which we can switch straight over to.
Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. Which new 2.0 feature was surprisingly difficult to implement or surprisingly easy?
Go ahead, Richard.
Everything. In both directions. I've already shown you kind of the open show kind of system. So that's how complex that gets. Is an entirely new layer underneath that, which we didn't show, which is that Tlaloc then had to make each of those buttons available in in Isadora, or each of those commands available in Isadora, because Universe talks to Isadora and Isadora talks to Mix Effect. So, there's a huge complexity in any kind of movement, any direction. So when we move graphics to ME4, so that means that we have to now bring in the ME4 multi-view, say, into the control room. So then that's an extra hardware device that needs to be plugged in the control room that takes the multi-view from ME4 into the control room. But then also we need an interface that controls that. The interface needs to be built in Universe, but then the interface commands have to be built in Isadora. And then on top of that, we need to then move the different sources and route the different sources, where JJ is physically changing the video hub routing in the control room to be able to get the right sources into ME4, and then remove those from the ME1 where the main cutting is done because they're no longer needed there. So every move is generally, as Tlaloc mentioned, very carefully considered and done incrementally, and it can be quite painstaking because we are obviously, as has been mentioned many times, building the airplane as we are flying.
Yeah, go ahead, Tlaloc.
Yeah, so real quick, the adding of MEs was a lot less complicated than I thought it was going to be. So for me, that was an easy side. But then again, as Richard pointed out, nothing is really that easy. But and then on the surprisingly difficult side is feedback. I mean, I feel like that is feedback. I dream that word at night. So
yeah, and what I think is interesting is because we're doing so much with low code. So we're a lot of this is between Isadora and Universe, and a lot of things we're not writing as much code, but we are able to. Even though this is taking a long time, it's still going a lot faster than a lot of traditional development would take. And we are able to think about what we actually need so that when eventually we or somebody else writes this into an interface, you're not writing into and building an architecture around something that you think will work. We're using it every day. and we know that these are the things that are the pain points. Next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. How are you going to integrate Lisa Studio into the pipeline without a Lisa processor? The software seems to be designed for DAW-based production, and a processor is needed for live use.
If you, turns out, if you're on a Mac and you use Loopback, you can deliver Dante to the bridge in the Lisa Studio. That's how we're doing it. Next question.
Raj Shandil from Los Angeles, California. What features and improvements would the panelists like to see on the RFI for 2.0?
I think we kind of talked through a lot of the stuff that we're working on right now and kind of moving through that. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Well, there's little teeny tiny things like in the Mukana panel interface. There's a large distance at the top. I'd love to be able to get that up closer to the eye-line monitor. But these are things that they're building so much in the back end that these little personal interfaces, that would be better for me. Nobody else probably cares. I'm hesitant to bring up too many of those things because I know how hard the back end group is working.
Next question.
Alexander Knight from Vancouver, BC, Canada. How can we make Office Hours 2.0 sustainable with respect to ongoing cost? It's not fair for one person to shoulder all those costs. What about a recurring donation system?
We're working on that. I just want to make sure that everything's all, I do appreciate that. And I know people have offered to help in a while. And I just wanted to make sure that we've done a bunch of things, like we got an actual 501c3 up so that it's all, properly managed. We've been building up we have insurance. We have, all the things that are there. We want to organically kind of build all of that out. And I just wanted to make sure that I knew where the money was going to go and how we would spend it. And to make sure that it really made impact. And so, I've been okay with shouldering it up until now, but definitely we'll be allowing other people to contribute. So in the not too distant future, because it's going to allow us to scale. I just wanted to make sure I knew what I really wanted to go to things as opposed to just paying the bills. And so and we are talking to some of our partners about also supporting us. So we may have a lot of this may open up pretty quickly once we get going here. So we're working on ways to underwrite it without too much trouble, but it's been small. The numbers have been small, but part of the reason they're small is we're not taking on certain things that would be more expensive yet. So next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. So when does 3.0 go cloud-based?
I actually think it'll be most likely 4.0 that goes cloud. So just to kind of manage people's expectations, there is 2.0 is going to get us to 3.0 in my eyes is to refine this and to get a much wider distribution. So it's, really figuring out the architecture of how do we get it out to lots of places? How do we get it all over the world? And I tend to be a little patient about it. I also think that if we do the math, when we talk about expense, if we do the math of what it's going to take, how many computers and pieces of hardware that we're doing, and how many things at 4K and HDR and surround we're doing, I don't know if a cloud solution to this would pencil out. Like we should probably do the calculation, but I think it would be if we're doing something every day. And right now we're doing it just in the mornings. But if you picture us doing something eventually 8, 12, 16 hours a day at 4K, HDR, with all the stuff that we're doing and all the computers and hardware that would be required to do that, I think that you may find that the hourly costs of a cloud solution would be pretty expensive. So until we found somebody, it would probably add up, I think, a lot to a lot of money, just doing it in my head with the number of inputs that we're using, the number of computers, the number of pieces of hardware. There are definitely places, if I'm standing up a show, I think there's a lot of things that cloud makes sense. But I think that what we're doing here, at least the rough math that I've done, looking at it in the past, is that this would be a really expensive, tens of thousands of dollars a month to turn on for what we planned, where we plan to go. And so right now we're doing things that I think would be very hard. HDR and everything else, we're not doing it yet, but this fall we're going to be doing HDR in 5.1. It's going to be a regular thing. That would be, I think, more difficult in the cloud right now. And and again, people will ask why are we doing 4K and HDRs? Because we get a lot more attention doing that. When you stand out, you get there's a lot of people paying attention to what we're doing because we're doing something that's bigger, because we're doing something on the front edge, because we're doing things that there's hardware and solutions that are there's hardware and solutions that are there. And again, there's also one of the reasons that we have it set up. There's a moment of why we've not put it in the data center is because I have right now, I still hope to use a big stage that's right next to us. And so we used it a little bit in the past, and being able to stream that out. If I put it in a data center now, I have to get all those signals back into the data center. And so we don't know. We may lose access to that stage. We'll see. But if we don't, you're talking about a stage that may now be running another 20 inputs, 10 to 20 inputs into it, where we start doing, I have a hope that we can do interactive shows where we're building a short film and everyone gets to watch from behind the scenes. But that's going to be a lot of inputs and a lot of other things that are there. And so putting it somewhere else would just mean now I have to move, 10 to 20 signals around again. I probably won't do that anytime soon. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, how accessibility friendly are the control web pages?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, there's several different kind of answers to this, and we've tried to make the interface as user friendly and as visually friendly as possible. But there's no kind of system built in, screen reader system built into the back end that really works very well for TDs. So the cutting interface, as Dennis showed it earlier on, we've tried to make everything stand out, both for anyone of any different level of visual detail to be able to clearly see different sections. As Tlaloc mentioned, there's feedback coming in so that you can tell what's in use. And so on and so forth. So there is a number of different elements that we've tried to build in to make it accessible for everyone. But there's a long way to go on that as well.
All right. Well done. Well done to everyone. Just an incredible lift. We're going to do these more often. I had just realized a couple of weeks ago that we hadn't done this for a while, and so now that we have somebody managing second hours, we'll do this more frequently. Especially when there's, we'll have Josh kind of talking to the team and figuring out when's a good time to. We've got some new things we want to show or things that we've done, and we'll start to pick up speed there. But I really want to thank everybody who's playing, like everyone in the back end, people who are training, people who are working on it, the developers that are partnering with us, the people who are every day making this happen 7 days a week. Just really amazing work, and it's very inspiring for me. It's part of what makes it easy for me to get up every morning and do this, is that it's not just me opening up Zoom and doing the best I can. We would never, I don't think anybody else in the world would ever get to where we are right now. So without this group. So really, really amazing work. So thank you to the incredible team putting this together. If you want to be part of the team, contact. I don't know if we have an official place to contact folks, but Richard and Dennis and Tlaloc, and but we'll push this more, make it more available to folks to jump in. But I would highly recommend it. It's not just that you learn a lot and potentially that this could turn into something in the future, but it's a great group of people who show up for this. Just really the kind of person that shows up and says, I want to do this thing, kind of people you want to hang out with. So I would highly recommend it. Thanks to the producers for all the great questions, keeping everything rolling forward. And of course, thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. Of course, the credits are slow today because we're showing a bunch of things. Remember that Michael Krasny is in 2 hours. We're going to have put that out there on Discord. 2 hours to Krasny. 2 hours to Krasny. 2 hours to Krasny. 2 hours to Krasny. See, I can do loud whispering. 2 hours to Krasny. 2 hours. 2 hours. Mitchell loves this.
And you do it as Bane.
2 hours to Krasny. You're looking for the bananas.
Whisper 3.0.
They need to find a body, brother. I was just watching it the other day. No, not you.
The Bane Whisperer.
The Bane Whisperer.
Sounds more like Sean Connery.
There is such a Bane done. It kind of sounds like Sean Connery.
That's why people should use good headphones.